Of all the battles billionaire Thorn Vexar had ever fought, corporate takeovers, market crashes, technological revolutions, the one he was losing was hidden behind the towering gates of his Azure Peak estate. It was the profound, devastating silence of his daughter Leora, a silence that began the day a shuttle crash stole his wife and her ability to move. He'd spent a fortune on miracles, but her smile remained a ghost of the past, until a stranger breached his walls. Not a spy or an assassin, but a shoeless, famished boy from the streets, who saw a girl in a wheelchair and did the one thing no one else could. He started to dance. He asked for nothing, he expected nothing, but the sound of Leora's laughter that echoed through the garden that day was the first note in a symphony that would shatter the silence forever, rewriting the destiny of a broken girl, a lonely tycoon, and the vagrant lad whose greatest wealth was his joy. Welcome to Tales After Dark. Comment where you are watching from. Billionaire spots. A shoeless, famished youth sneaked past the barriers of a villa and spotted the tycoon's girl perched in quietude, her expression shrouded in gloom. Then he pulled off an act nobody foresaw. He started gyrating, not for cash, not for grub, but purely to spark her grin. What unfolded afterward would reshape their existences eternally. Thorn Vexar ranked among the richest folks in the metropolis. His dominion covered tech, finance, and logistics, granting him the moniker the Silver Streak, since every venture he backed soared to triumph. But within the towering fences of his Azure Peak estate, his biggest battle wasn't commerce. It was the hush of a child whose chuckles he yearned to reclaim. His sole progeny, Leora, formerly a vibrant, energetic 7-year-old, had been rendered motionless following the devastating shuttle crash that also snuffed out his cherished spouse, Mirabelle. Once her giggles resonated through the domicile like harmony. Once she dashed across the orchards pursuing fireflies. Yet now she lingered mutely in her mobility chair, gazing through the pane, her essence dulled. Initially, Thorn combated it via his fortune. He jetted her to Japan for operations, to Switzerland for rehab, to Canada for cutting-edge care. Each effort concluded in identical devastating letdown. Leora's beam waned, her chuckles vanished. She seldom exited her chamber, save when her caregiver wheeled her to the arbor. Thorn, albeit haughty and aloof to outsiders, sensed his core fracturing daily. He observed her gazing vacantly afar. But one sweltering midday, an unforeseen event transpired. Leora rested serenely in the arbor, her gaze locked on the portal yonder, adrift in reverie. She detected motion peripherally. A lad, unshod and tattered, crept stealthily via a narrow gap near the thicket. His top was ripped, his pants oversized for his slender build, his locks disheveled, his shins marred from street existence. But upon eyeing Leora, his orbs gleamed with roguery. Then, sans utterance, he commenced gyrating. Not a polished routine, not the sort viewed in clips or broadcasts. His strides were overblown and comical, his limbs flailed like a jester's, his form contorting and whirling in absurd manners. At first, Leora merely fluttered her lids, then a tiny chortle slipped her mouth. The lad widened his peepers and feigned a tumble, recovering theatrically. Leora slapped her palms, and then, akin to wonder, she chortled. It wasn't a courteous chuckle or coerced titter. It was genuine, unbridled mirth that reverberated throughout the premises. The lad beamed and gyrated fiercer, twirling, leaping, tumbling on the turf like a thespian on stage. Leora's mirth amplified. His moniker was Zephyr. At minimum, that's the label he offered when queried. No one grasped his complete tale since he seldom discoursed it. What locals in the vicinity did comprehend was that Zephyr lacked abode. Certain evenings he slumbered beneath the overpass close to the tram hub. Alternate nights he discovered nooks in incomplete structures for concealment. He possessed no guardians anybody witnessed, no kin, and no cot barring the rigid pavement. Zephyr harbored one element that sustained him, his glee. When starvation intensified and slumber evaded, he gyrated. When commuters bellowed at him for panhandling at signals, he gyrated. He gyrated for outsiders on avenues, and occasionally they tossed him scant tokens. Gyrating rendered him vital. It bestowed elation amid his torment. His motions were his utterance, his barrier, his method of evading the agony of being undesired. That midday, Zephyr roamed beyond the magnate's villa. He peeked via a minuscule aperture in the portal and beheld Leora perched nearby in stillness, her petite visage propped on the mobility chair's arm, her orbs fastened mournfully on the soil. Something stirred within Zephyr. He pondered. I recognize sorrow's grip, but if I gyrate for her, perhaps I can elicit her beam. Perhaps, merely perhaps, I can dispel her melancholy. Thus, Zephyr crept silently through the thicket and entered the arbor. He initiated gyrating, contorting goofy expressions and warping his frame in ludicrous amplified gestures. When Leora chortled, it seemed to him like a conquest surpassing discovering sustenance post a prolonged famine. Her mirth accelerated his pulse. He gyrated bolder, untamer, each slap and titter from her infusing fresh vigor. In those invaluable instants, Zephyr overlooked his unshod state, his famine, and his homelessness. He wasn't a mendicant or avenue urchin. He was merely a kid delivering delight to another kid. What Zephyr failed to perceive was that he wasn't solely prompting Leora's chortles. He was altering her existence, and his perpetually, within the villa, Thorn Vexar perceived it. He stiffened. He hadn't encountered that resonance in moons. He dashed to the terrace, anticipating a marvel. And somewhat he did. His offspring was chortling, slapping, her orbs vibrant anew, and the origin of her delight wasn't remedy, not rehab, not currency. It was a vagrant lad gyrating unshod in his premises from the terrace. Thorn Vexar's initial response was fury. How had this shabby avenue lad infiltrated his premises? Where were the sentinels? What if he posed peril? Thorn's knuckles tightened. He nearly hollered, primed to expel the lad forthwith. But then he beheld Leora. Her jowls were rosy with thrill. Her limbs were gesturing, slapping with vigor he hadn't observed in moons. Her spine, typically slumped, was erect, and her mirth, boisterous, unchecked, brimming with vitality, permeated the atmosphere. Thorn halted abruptly. For moons, he had expended billions pursuing medics and cures, solely to witness his offspring plunge deeper into despondency. Now, in under 10 minutes, this unshod lad had revived her. Thorn didn't comprehend it. He didn't credit it, but he couldn't refute his vision. He concealed behind a granite column of the villa, observing mutely, his torso constricted, not with ire this occasion, but with an emotion he had nearly obliterated, optimism. As the lad gyrated and Leora slapped, Thorn grasped something startling. This avenue lad was accomplishing for his offspring what his entire fortune couldn't. Zephyr returned the subsequent midday, identically as initially, hushed, swift and expectant. He didn't lurk to pilfer. He arrived since he now bore a minor quest in his core, elicit Leora's chortles anew. He had dozed behind a stall the prior eve, belly grumbling, but he awoke beaming. He had unearthed something grander than famine, intent. As he crept through the thicket, he spied her awaiting by the portal, orbs luminous, palms already primed to slap. Prepared, he inquired, elevating his limbs like a carnival fool. Leora tittered and affirmed. Before he could commence, Thorn Vexar emerged. For an instant, Zephyr rigidified. He recognized that glare, grown-up wrath preceding a thrashing or eviction. He retained his respiration, ready to flee if necessary. Leora's tone shattered the strain. "Papa, kindly don't banish him. Kindly." Thorn scrutinized the lad intimately initially. The top was torn at the joint. The pants dangled on a midriff too narrow. The lad was unshod with blemishes on his shins, narrating tales no youth ought to narrate. But his orbs were firm. Not conceited, not feeble, merely firm. "What's your label?" Thorn queried. "Zephyr," the lad responded. "Why did you infiltrate?" Zephyr gulped. "I beheld her. She appeared gloomy the initial day. I figured perhaps if I gyrated she would chortle. I didn't arrive to seize anything, sir. I solely arrived to bestow something minor. I can depart afterward." The terms were straightforward, but they permeated Thorn like precipitation on arid terrain. "Where do you dwell?" Thorn inquired, milder now. "Anywhere," Zephyr stated. "Tram hub. Occasionally I gyrate for meager coins. Occasionally I merely gyrate for myself so famine won't prevail." Leora's orbs brimmed. "He gladdens me, Papa." Thorn glimpsed his offspring. Her jowls were radiant, her spine aligned. He noted her digits twitch. It could have been minor, but it was motion. Motion he hadn't witnessed in moons. He inhaled. "All right, you can linger today and view where I can observe. No misconduct. Comprehend," Zephyr affirmed swiftly, solace flooding his visage. He pivoted to Leora with a smirk. "Performance time," he queried. She slapped. And thus the arbor transformed into a platform anew. One day evolved into three into a week. The sentinels were directed not to halt the lad anymore. "Admit him at 4, Thorn commanded. "He departs at 6. He dines prior to departure." Zephyr appeared daily with fresh concepts. He gyrated like a vortex. He narrated amusing anecdotes from the tram hub. He enacted disputes between shuttle operators and their aides. He produced noises, plummeted theatrically, arose majestically, inclined like a sovereign, then squinted until Leora's mirth quaked her frame. But it wasn't merely mirth, something additional was occurring. Leora's palms fortified from slapping. She began elevating her limbs to mimic Zephyr's gestures. Her tone grew bolder. She instructed him again, and no, execute it like yester. She even attempted to rotate her mobility chair in tiny loops when he whirled on the turf, and each minor pivot felt like triumph. Thorn observed all this serenely. He noted the trifles, how Zephyr never solicited anything pre-performance, how he invariably checked Leora's expression before attempting a quip, how he anticipated naught but slaps. Yet when sustenance was proffered, he consumed delicately, like one who knew dining once daily's significance. In the dusks post-Zephyr's exit, Leora discoursed more than prior. "Papa, did you witness the one where he mimicked an alarm? Papa, today I sensed something in my digits. Papa, can he arrive tomorrow?" The medic inspected her during a standard clinic trip and was astonished. "Her involvement is restored," he remarked, examining her intently. "This motivation type can ignite recuperation routes. We can't always elucidate. Whatever you're executing, sustain it. Sustain." That eve, Thorn stood solitary in the arbor, gazing at the area where Zephyr gyrated. He experienced something absent for ages. Appreciation not from a transaction. He murmured into the tepid breeze, "Gratitude, lad." And though none heard, the arbor appeared to concur. It occurred on a routine midday, the sort where wonders aren't anticipated. The orb dipped low, the thicket cast gentle shades on the sward, and a broadcaster somewhere aired an antique melody. Zephyr was mid-act executing his delayed motion gyrate, where he shifted as if duration thickened. Leora chortled so intensely she neglected securing her coverlet. "Hold," she uttered, regaining breath. "Permit me attempt something." She positioned both palms on the mobility chair's rests. Her visage tensed with exertion. For a pulse, naught transpired. Then her shoulders ascended, then her torso, then gradually her pelvis elevated an inch, then two. She maintained quivering for 3 extended tallies. 1. Zephyr whispered orbs broad. 2. Thorn tallied, advancing unwittingly. 3. Leora exhaled before descending back into the seat, gasping and beaming, orbs damp. Quietude enveloped the arbor. It wasn't the former quietude, the burdensome one. It was a sacred quietude, the type post to supplication's unforeseen fulfillment. Zephyr shattered it with a yell. "You achieved it. You achieved it." He whirled thrice and knelt beside her. "Victor." Thorn knelt oppositely, his palms quaking. He caressed his offspring's brow lightly. "You are valiant," he stated. "I am so proud of you." Leora extended for both. One tiny palm for her sire, one for her comrade. "I'm not frightened anymore," she said when he gyrates. "I feel capable of motion." They didn't inform the globe. Not yet. They didn't broadcast or summon periodicals. They merely persisted. More mirth, more rehearsal, more minuscule motions accumulating to grandeur. That eve, Thorn couldn't slumber. He paced the extended corridors of his villa, his footfalls resounding against the stone slabs. He contemplated his offspring, her luminous orbs when Zephyr arrived, her firmer tone when she summoned him. Then he contemplated his arrogance, his persona, his title. It was a clash within his torso, between arrogance and affection, between societal expectations and cardiac dictates. By Aurora, Thorn grasped something. Prestige couldn't mend his offspring. Currency hadn't preserved her mirth. For the initial occasion, Thorn conceded inwardly. Perhaps riches isn't supreme authority. Perhaps benevolence is. One weekend midday, Thorn summoned Zephyr to perch with him in the arbor. For the initial occasion, the lad wasn't requested to gyrate. He was requested to converse. "Narrate about yourself," Thorn stated. Zephyr wavered. Nobody ever queried about him. Folks solely viewed his soiled garb and dismissed him. But Thorn's orbs were earnest, nearly tender. "I don't recall my birthplace," Zephyr commenced softly. "My dam perished when I was tiny. My sire departed. Some vendors at the bazaar provided grub occasionally. But as I aged, they ceased, so I lingered with other lads at the tram station. We slumber under the overpass or in vacant stalls." Thorn hearkened, his torso constricting. "Why do you gyrate?" he queried. Zephyr beamed faintly. "When famished, your frame feels ponderous. If you merely perch, the famine triumphs. But if you shift, if you gyrate, it lightens. Folks chortle. Occasionally they bestow tokens, occasionally not. But minimally, I don't feel unseen."
Thorn affirmed gradually. He had frequented elite academies, savored exquisite repassams, and globe-trotted, yet perched before him was a lad who had absorbed existence's profoundest verity sans instructor. Joy is fortitude from today, Thorn declared resolutely. You are unseen no more. You are component of this domicile. Zephyr fluttered lids, uncertain if he auditory correctly. But when Leora maneuvered nearer and seized his palm beaming wide, he grasped he was no longer merely an avenue lad. He was evolving kin. The genuine pivot arrived one midday that commenced ordinarily. The orb was tepid, the blooms in the arbor oscillated gently, and Zephyr executed his whimsical automaton gyrate while Leora slapped. I desire to attempt upright, she hollered abruptly, astounding herself. Zephyr halted mid-gesture. I intend it, she persisted, her tone robust. Thorn, perching nearby, stiffened. He didn't wish her overexertion, but he also knew he couldn't restrain her. Leora positioned her palms on her mobility chair grips. Her limbs quivered, but she persisted. She thrust intensely, her visage wrinkling in exertion. Gradually, agonizingly, she ascended. One joint quivered, then the other aligned marginally. She wasn't upright lofty, but she was elevated, her soles pressing the terrain, her form vertical initially post-mishap. Thorn's core pounded. The sentinels at the portal rigidified. Even the domestics inhaled from afar. Zephyr yelled with delight, whirling loops before kneeling. You achieved it. You're upright, Leora. You're upright. Leora maintained there for 3 ticks, her petite frame quivering like foliage in gust. Then she descended gently into the seat. Instead of weeping, she chortled. I was upright. Did you witness me, Papa? I was upright. Thorn knelt beside her, tears obscuring sight. He contacted her quivering palms. I witnessed, darling, and I have never been prouder. That day the villa ceased silence. It thundered with mirth, slaps, and acclaims. The pivot had arrived, and Thorn knew it. His offspring's mending had initiated, and it all commenced with a lad who once possessed naught but a gyrate. That eve, long post Leora's slumber, Thorn perched in his study's quietude, the documents on his bureau untouched. His device hummed with alerts, but he disregarded. His intellect fixated on one entity, Zephyr. For weeks the lad had restored vitality to his offspring. She chortled anew, she gestured anew, she existed anew, and tonight she had been upright. Even if briefly it was wonder, Thorn knew it wasn't fortune. It was Zephyr. That eve, Thorn discovered Zephyr perching serenely on the rear stairs. His limbs encircled his joints, gazing into obscurity, as if dubious of belonging. Thorn descended beside him. You shouldn't be solitary out here, Thorn uttered tenderly. Zephyr shrugged minimally. I'm accustomed, sir. Not anymore, Thorn retorted, his tone firm, bearing vow's burden. This is your abode now, your kin component. You'll consume 3 repasts daily. You'll attend academy, and you'll never ponder headrest locale again. Zephyr's orbs broadened, his tone quivering as he murmured, Gratitude, sir. Thorn pivoted to confront him wholly, his own orbs shimmering. Hearken, Zephyr, I comprehend what you've bestowed my offspring. You provided something no currency, no medic, no remedy could supply. Optimism. And anyone bestowing optimism isn't merely worth acquaintance, they are worth affection. For the initial occasion in existence, Zephyr felt truly perceived. His gullet constricted, and tears cascaded his jowls. That eve, he reclined on plush bedding, secure under roofing in a locale he could finally dub home. The frigid pavement eaves concluded. It didn't prolong for the tale to surge the metropolis. A potent tycoon had welcomed an avenue lad. To some it was imprudent emotion. To others, it was genuine valor's emblem. The journals flared with banners. Tycoon Vexar embraces vagrant youth. Metropolis split between indignation and esteem. Some of Thorn's commerce allies drew him aside. Thorn, this harms your prestige. An avenue lad in your villa. What if he pilfers? What if he shames you? Consider your persona. But Thorn had metamorphosed. He no longer heeded superficial facades. My persona, he uttered calmly. My offspring is upright anew. My offspring beams anew. That is the sole persona I heed. Leora herself informed any questioner. Zephyr is my comrade. He fortifies me. If you dislike him, you don't cherish me. The skeptical voices diminished changed because while some derided, many revered. Neighbors murmured differently now. Envision an avenue lad aiding Leora ambulate anew. Perhaps benevolence is wealthier than currency. And amid it all, Zephyr stayed modest. He disregarded journals or chatter. Daily he merely gyrated. Daily he chortled with Leora. Daily he bestowed his endowment. The villa once resounding with quietude, now brimmed with vitality. Morns initiated with Leora, summoning Zephyr. Midday brimmed with mirth, as he executed his goofy sequences. Babes concluded with communal repasts, where Leora bantered her sire for beaming oftener. Gradually, Leora's rehab enhanced. With Zephyr acclaiming beside, she ambulated minor paces, then extended. She still utilized her mobility chair occasionally, but dread no longer dominated. She existed anew. Thorn, too, transmuted. He ceased being merely a tycoon pursuing transactions. He was a sire rediscovering elation, and with Zephyr, he discovered paternal acts anew, directing, instructing, safeguarding. One day Leora eyed Zephyr, and murmured, "Now I'm not solitary anymore, I have a sibling." Thorn chortled, but inwardly, his core expanded with pride. For the initial years, his domicile ceased being merely a villa. It was a hearth. One dusk, as the orb tinted the metropolis heavens in aureate and scarlet, Thorn stood in the arbor, observing Leora execute cautious paces with Zephyr grasping her palm. The resonance of her mirth, blended with Zephyr's frolicsome yells, permeated the atmosphere. In that instant, Thorn comprehended something hitherto unknown. Currency was utilitarian, yes, but genuine riches wasn't in ledgers or transactions. Genuine riches was in his offspring's mirth, in the valor of a lad who defied street breakage, in the affection binding them. He murmured to himself, "I thought I possessed everything, but I possessed naught until this lad." From that day, Thorn Vexar became renowned, not merely as affluent, but as heartfelt. Zephyr ceased being the vagrant lad. He was Lawson kin component, and Leora's tale became optimism's lighthouse for households universally. That occasionally the remedy we require derives not from remedy or currency, but from affection, benevolence, and unforeseen camaraderie. If this tale moved you, inform us in remarks, and state your global locale. Comment part 2 for the continuation.